Right now, in the middle of July, there is one perennial blooming in every single state in America. From Maine to Florida, from Seattle to Phoenix, Zone 3 to Zone 10. Rich soil, poor soil, full sun, part shade, clay, sand, drought, humidity, it does not care. It is blooming today and it will still be blooming in October, producing a brand new flower every single morning for the next 3 months. Each flower lasts exactly one day, opens at dawn, perfect by noon, closed by nightfall, and tomorrow morning there is a fresh one in exactly the same spot. No deadheading, no fertilizing, no spraying, no staking, no dividing unless you want more of them. The entire plant asks nothing from you and gives you flowers every single day for 4 months. This is the daylily. And if you planted the right variety, it is the only perennial you need to fill every flowerless week from now through first frost. But there is one thing you can do between bloom flushes, takes about 10 seconds per plant, that doubles the number of flowers you get in a season. Most gardeners have never heard of it. I will get to that. I have been growing daylilies for over 25 years. For the first 10 of those years, I grew the wrong kind, the orange ones, the ones that bloom for 2 weeks in June and spend the rest of the summer sitting there doing nothing while I wondered why anyone bothered with them. Then a woman at my local garden club handed me a division of something she called Stella de Oro and told me to put it in full sun and forget about it. That single division is still blooming in my front border. It has been there for 15 years. It has produced flowers every single day from late May through October, every single year, and I have spent exactly $0 maintaining it. The clump is now large enough that I have divided it 4 times, and each division became a full plant. One free gift from a neighbor became over a dozen blooming plants spread across my entire property. That is the daylily I want to talk about today, not the ditch lily, the reblooming daylily, the one that does what no other perennial in your garden is doing right now. There are 5 specific varieties that do it best. One trick between flushes that doubles their output, and one garden problem this plant solves better than anything else you can buy. If you find this useful, I would appreciate it if you passed it along to someone whose garden needs the same information. There are 2 completely different daylilies, and most gardeners only know one. The common orange daylily, Hemerocalis fulva, is the one growing in ditches along every highway in America. It blooms for 2 to 3 weeks in June, and then it is done for the year. That is the daylily most people picture. It gives the entire species a reputation for being boring and short-lived in bloom. I grew up seeing them in every neglected yard on my street, and I assumed that was all a daylily could do. 2 weeks of orange and then 11 months of just leaves. But reblooming daylilies, bred specifically to flower repeatedly from June through October, are a completely different plant in terms of performance. They produce their first flush in early summer, rest for a week or 2, then push out a second flush, rest again, push a third flush, and keep cycling until frost shuts them down. One plant producing fresh flowers every day for 4 months instead of 2 weeks. The difference between the ditch lily and a reblooming variety is the difference between a firecracker and a campfire. Same family. Completely different experience. And here is where the confusion costs gardeners real flowers. Somebody plants that common orange daylily, watches it bloom for 2 weeks, watches it stop, and writes off the entire species. Meanwhile, their neighbor 3 houses down has a row of reblooming daylilies along her front walk that have been flowering since late May and will not stop until hard frost. Same common name, same leaf shape, entirely different plant in practice. If you have ever dismissed daylilies as short-blooming or boring, you dismissed the wrong one. The one you want has been quietly outperforming half the perennials in your garden center this entire time. Now that you know there are 2 completely different daylilies, I want to show you the 5 specific varieties that rebloom all summer, including the one I would choose if I could only plant one. Each of these solves a different design problem in your garden, so pay attention to which gap you are trying to fill. Stella de Oro is the most planted daylily in America, and there is a reason for that. Golden yellow flowers on compact plants, 12 to 14 inches tall. The blooms are trumpet-shaped, about 3 inches across, a warm buttery gold that catches afternoon light and practically glows against dark mulch. Blooms from late May through October in most zones with barely a pause between flushes. Tolerates everything: heat, cold, drought, clay, neglect. Zones 3 through 10. A friend of mine moved into a house 3 years ago where the previous owner had planted a row of Stella de Oro along the driveway. Nobody had watered them, fed them, or touched them in at least 2 years. They were blooming. Full flush of golden yellow flowers in July, right on schedule, as if someone had been tending them every week. That is the kind of plant this is. If you plant one daylily from this entire list, this is the one. It is the default answer for a reason. Happy Returns is a lemon yellow daylily on plants nearly identical in habit to Stella de Oro, but with a lighter, softer color. The flowers are a pale, almost creamy yellow that reads as cool next to the warm gold of Stella. Same relentless reblooming performance, same bulletproof toughness, same zones. Choose Happy Returns if you want that softer tone instead of deep gold. The two planted side by side create a soft to bright yellow gradient that looks intentional and designed, not like you just grabbed whatever was on the sale rack. In my front border, I have 3 Stella de Oro in front of 2 Happy Returns. The color steps from bright gold at the edge to soft lemon behind it, and the effect is a wash of warm yellow that carries from June through September without a single bare day. I want to pause here for a moment. Those 2 varieties alone, planted in a group of 5 along a walkway or at the front of a border, give you daily flowers for 4 months. 2 cultivars, 5 plants, less than $40 at most garden centers. And we have not even touched on color beyond yellow. That is coming. Rosy Returns is the first truly pink reblooming daylily that performs at the same level as Stella. Soft pink petals with a deep rose-red eye zone radiating from a green throat, sitting on the same compact frame as the previous 2. The color combination is striking in a way most people do not expect from daylilies. Zones 3 through 9. My neighbor planted 3 of these last spring along her mailbox, and by midsummer she had strangers slowing down to look at them. Pink daylilies that bloom all summer are uncommon enough that people notice them. Plant this one where you need warm color instead of yellow, or mix it with the yellow varieties for a combination that has more range than most gardeners expect from a single species. Pardon Me is deep cranberry red, rich, saturated color on compact plants with flowers about 3 inches across, one of the best dark-colored rebloomers available. Repeat blooms reliably from June through September. And most people do not know this about Pardon Me. It is fragrant, one of the few daylilies with noticeable scent. A sweet, light perfume you catch when you lean close, especially in the morning when the flowers first open. Zones 3 through 9. This is the one I grow in containers on my back patio, in a large terracotta pot, minimum 12-inch diameter, with drainage. The dark red flowers against the warm clay color of the pot is a combination that looks like I spent hours planning it. I did not. I stuck a division in a pot 4 years ago, and it has bloomed every summer since. When I sit outside with coffee in the morning and catch that scent from 3 feet away, I remember why I grow this particular variety and not just the yellow ones. Look, every one of these varieties will give you flowers from June through frost. But only if you do one thing between flushes that most gardeners skip entirely. That trick is coming right after this last variety. Every Daylily is a newer introduction with apricot orange flowers and a green throat, bred specifically for extended rebloom. The color is warm but not hot, a soft peachy orange that blends easily with both the yellow and the pink varieties without clashing. It lives up to its name, flowers continuously from June through hard frost with minimal gap between flushes. Zones 4 through 9. Taller than the others at about 20 inches, which makes it useful for mid-border placement where the compact varieties are too short. I planted a group of 3 behind my Stella de Oro row last year, and the height difference created a 2-layer effect. Golden yellow carpet in front, apricot orange rising behind it, both blooming at the same time from June onward. That kind of layered color from a single species is something most gardeners only get by combining 5 or 6 different perennials. 2 daylily varieties did it. Now let me tell you how to plant these for maximum bloom, because placement matters more than most people realize. Full sun produces the most flowers, 6 to 8 hours minimum. Daylilies tolerate part shade, but rebloom slows significantly below 5 hours of direct sun. You get one flush instead of 3 or 4. That is the difference between a plant that blooms for 3 weeks and a plant that blooms for 4 months. Same variety, same soil, just a different amount of sunlight. I've tested this in my own yard. The Stella de Oro along my south-facing front walk, full sun all day, produces 4 distinct flushes per season. The same cultivar planted on the east side of my house, where it gets morning sun but afternoon shade, manages 2 flushes. Good, but not great. If you want the full 4-month performance, give them the sunniest spot you have. Soil does not matter much. Clay, sand, loam, rocky, amended, unamended. Daylilies grow in soil that would end most perennials. I garden in heavy clay and my daylilies have never complained about it once. The one thing they do not tolerate is standing water. Wet feet rot the crown within a season. If you have a low spot that puddles after rain, raise the planting area slightly or choose a different location. Plant with the crown where the leaves meet the roots, right at soil level. Not buried, not exposed. Crown at grade, this matters. A crown buried 2 inches deep will survive but bloom less. A crown sitting above grade dries out in summer heat. Right at soil level is the target. Water deeply once at planting, and then leave it alone unless there is no rain for 2 weeks. Established daylilies are genuinely drought tolerant. They wilt slightly in extreme heat, recover overnight, and keep blooming the next morning like nothing happened. Now, the trick. This is what I promised you at the beginning, and it is the single piece of information that separates gardeners who get 2 flushes from gardeners who get 4. When the first flush of flowers finishes in early to mid-July, every spent flower stem, called a scape, is still standing there with a dried-up flower at the top, just a bare stalk with nothing useful happening. Snap the entire scape off at the base where it emerges from the leaf clump. Do not cut the leaves, just the bare scapes. Grip it near the bottom and snap it clean. It breaks easily. Removing spent scapes signals the plant to push out new scapes from the crown for the next bloom cycle. If you leave the old scapes standing, the plant puts energy into making seed pods instead of new flowers. It thinks its job is done. It starts investing in seeds for next year instead of flowers for right now. The moment you snap off that spent scape, you are telling the plant that it has not finished flowering yet. The crown responds by pushing new buds within a week to 10 days. Snapping off scapes takes 10 seconds per plant, and it is the difference between 2 flushes and 4 flushes per season. Same plant, same soil, same water. One quick snap between flushes doubles the total bloom count. I did not know this for my first 5 years of growing reblooming daylilies. I would get that first big flush in June, a decent second flush in late July, and then the plant would mostly quit for the year. I assumed that was normal. Then I read an article by a daylily hybridizer who said removing scapes was the single most important maintenance task for maximizing rebloom. I tried it that summer, snapped every spent scape after the first flush. The difference was so obvious I actually counted the flowers. My Stella de Oro produced over 60 individual blooms that season instead of the usual 30 or so. Same plant. One change. And here is the thing, it takes less time than deadheading roses. You are not picking off individual petals or cutting stems at an angle. You are snapping one bare stalk per plant, once between each flush. If you have 10 daylilies in your border, the entire job takes under 2 minutes, 4 or 5 times a season. That is less than 10 minutes of total effort across an entire summer for double the flowers. You now know the varieties and the trick. What remains is where to put them, so one plant solves the biggest gap in your garden, and how one purchase becomes an entire border. Daylilies are front-of-border plants, 12 to 20 inches tall, depending on variety. Plant them in groups of 3 to 5 of the same variety for a mass of color instead of scattered singles. I learned this the hard way. My first daylily planting was one Stella de Oro here, one Pardon Me there, one Happy Returns across the yard. Each plant bloomed beautifully on its own, but the effect was scattered, no impact, no design. When I finally grouped them, three of the same variety planted 18 inches apart, the difference was immediate. A single daylily looks like a plant. A group of 3 or 5 of the same variety looks like a garden. Line them along a walkway, the front edge of a perennial border, or the base of a fence or retaining wall. Mix Stella de Oro in front of taller July bloomers like coneflowers and black-eyed Susans. Coneflower grows 2 to 4 feet tall with pink-purple daisy-shaped flowers from June through September. Black-eyed Susan reaches 2 to 3 feet with golden petals around dark centers from July through October. Put those behind a row of 12-inch daylilies and you have a 2-layer border with no gaps and no bare soil visible from June through September. The golden yellow daylilies carpet the front while the taller plants rise behind them, and the color palette shifts from warm gold at ankle height to pink and deeper gold at waist height. That layered effect is what makes a border look designed rather than planted. For containers on a patio, Stella de Oro and Pardon Me are compact enough to bloom all summer in a large pot with drainage. My husband used to say container gardens were too much work because you have to replant them every spring. I put a Pardon Me division in a pot on the back steps 4 years ago. It comes back every April, blooms from June through September, and the only thing I do is water it when the soil feels dry. He has not mentioned replanting since. Now I want to talk about why this particular plant matters more than just being pretty. This is the plant that closes the July gap for more gardens than any other single perennial. Spring bloomers finish in June. Your tulips, your irises, your peonies, they put on a show and then they are done. Fall bloomers, your asters, your sedums, your chrysanthemums do not start until September. That leaves a 6-week dead zone in between, late June through early August, the weeks when most perennial gardens go quiet. Your neighbor's border looks full and colorful in May, bare and green in July, and by August she is wondering what went wrong. That 6-week dead zone is exactly when reblooming daylilies are at peak performance. Their first flush hits in June, overlapping with the last of the spring bloomers. Their second and third flushes carry through July and August, covering the exact weeks when nothing else is flowering, and their final flush stretches into September and October, handing off to the fall bloomers. One species bridges the entire gap, not with scattered blooms here and there, but with a fresh flower every single morning through the weeks that defeat most gardens. I designed my own front border around this principle 3 years ago. Irises and peonies bloom in May and early June. As they finish, the daylilies take over and carry the color through the entire summer. In September, the asters start opening behind the daylilies and the two overlap for about 3 weeks before the daylilies finally stop at frost. From May 1st through the end of October, that border has flowers every single day. The daylilies are responsible for carrying the 4 months in the middle. Without them, there would be a hole from late June through August with nothing in bloom. With them, the hole does not exist. If you have ever wondered which single plant to buy first to fill that midsummer silence, this is the answer. One Stella de Oro planted this weekend in full sun fills the gap, starting now and every July for the next 20 years. And that brings me to the last thing worth knowing, which is how one daylily becomes an entire border without spending another dollar. Every 3 to 4 years, a daylily clump gets thick enough that bloom count starts to decline. The center crowds out. Flowers get smaller. This is not a problem. This is a signal to divide. And dividing is the easiest propagation you will ever do with any perennial. Early spring before new growth or early fall after bloom season ends are the 2 best windows. Dig the entire clump, shake off the soil, and pull it apart into divisions with your hands. Daylily roots separate easily without cutting. No knife, no saw, no special technique. You grab a fan of leaves in each hand and pull. They come apart. Each division should have a fan of leaves and a section of crown with healthy white roots. Replant divisions 18 inches apart. Water once. By next summer, each division is a full-size blooming plant producing its own daily flowers. One daylily purchased 3 years ago becomes 6 to 10 plants for free. Repeat every 3 to 4 years, and you can fill an entire border from a single original plant. That woman from my garden club who gave me one Stella de Oro division 15 years ago, that single division has become every daylily in my garden. Everyone. The row along my front walk, the group by the mailbox, the ones in containers on the patio, the cluster I gave my neighbor last fall, who is now growing her own border from it. All of them trace back to one free division, handed across a table at a Tuesday evening meeting. She spent nothing giving it to me. I spent nothing growing it, and now there are dozens of plants across 2 properties, blooming every day from June through October, all from that single act of pulling a clump apart and passing a piece along. Now, I want to step back and say something about what kind of plant this really is. Daylilies are not exciting. They are not trendy. Nobody posts them on garden Instagram because they are too common, too easy, too reliable. They do not have the drama of a peony in full bloom, or the elegance of a Japanese iris opening in morning light, or the late-season spectacle of an ornamental grass catching autumn sun. But the gardener who plants 5 Stella de Oro along her front walkway has flowers on her table every single day for 4 months, while her neighbor's border goes flowerless from July through August. The gardener who snaps off spent scapes between flushes gets twice the blooms from the same plant without buying anything, without applying anything, without doing anything except that one 10-second task. The gardener who divides her clumps every few years watches a single purchase become a whole border that keeps expanding and keeps blooming year after year. Common, easy, and reliable is exactly what a July garden needs. The plants that carry a garden through its hardest months are never the flashy ones. They are the ones that show up every single morning with a fresh flower, ask nothing, and keep going until frost makes them stop. I started this by telling you there is one perennial blooming right now in every single state in America, producing a brand new flower every morning and asking nothing in return. You now know which variety makes that happen. You know why it keeps cycling, because you snap those scapes off between flushes. And you know what garden problem that daily flower quietly solves. The 6 weeks in midsummer when everything else goes bare. The flower is the same one it was at the beginning of this conversation. What changed is that you understand what it can do for your garden and exactly how to make it happen. Which variety are you planting? Tell me in the comments. And if you already have daylilies and discovered the Scape-Snapping Trick on your own, tell me how much it changed your bloom count. A single honest number from your own garden is worth more than anything I can say. Go to your nearest garden center this weekend. Buy one Stella de Oro, just one. Plant it in the sunniest spot you have, crown at soil level, water it once, and leave it alone. It will bloom this summer. It will come back next spring bigger. By year 3, you will be dividing it and planting the divisions along your front walk. That is how every daylily border I have ever seen began, with one plant, put in the ground with the understanding that it was going to come back. I will see you next week. There is more I want to show you.